Hi, everyone, and welcome to the National Organization for Rare Disorders and the Aplastic Anemia and MDS International Foundation's webinar, Introducing the Global PNH Patient Registry. Thank you for joining us today. I am Joanna Lopez, a research associate at NORD. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to provide you of NORD's code of conduct for this in all of our events. Respect is critical as we work together to serve our rare disease community. As always, we want our programs to be safe spaces for all to participate. The full code of conduct is available on this workshop page. For today's webinar, we'll give a little background information on AMDSIF, NORD, and the I Am Rare program and platform, the importance of the Global PNH Patient Registry, and how you can get involved with the registry. So now I will turn it over to Dr. David Arten, Chair of the Medical Advisory Committee, and Janice Frey-Angel, CEO of AMDSIF, for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure for me to be involved in this registry and in this webinar. I've had a lot of experience working with the AMDSIF and with NORD, and I think that we have something here that is really going to be beneficial for our patients and our patient community.
And hello, I'm Janice Frey-Angel. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of Aplastic Anemia and MDS International Foundation. We're pleased to be partnering with NORD to launch the Global PNH Patient Registry. Let me tell you a little bit about AMDSIF. We're a patient-focused, patient-centered organization. We're dedicated to supporting patients and families living with aplastic anemia, MDS, and PNH, and related bone marrow failure diseases. AMDSIF supports patients through education, through patient and family conferences and webinars, patient education materials, and both in print and digital. You can go to our website and download, or we'll send out any materials to you for free, and patient support groups and all kinds of networks. And we also do a lot of health professional education. We are a resource for health professionals through research grants, through symposiums, through our biennial international scientific symposium, and professional education webinars. Next slide.
So NORD is an independent nonprofit working to improve the lives of rare disease patients and their families. NORD supports patient organizations, contributes to research, provides education, and disseminates information driving public policy. You can learn more about NORD and how to get involved at rarediseases.org. NORD offers core programs and services in 5 areas: research, patient services, membership, education, and policy and advocacy. The I Am Rare program falls in the research department, which you will hear a little bit more about later. So, rare disease patients have faced some of these obstacles and challenges at one point in their life. Little is known about the rare disease progression, and burden can often lead to delays in diagnosis. There are few medical experts and limited FDA-approved treatments. Only 5% of rare diseases have treatments, and the cost of care is high. Oftentimes, these rare diseases require extensive lifelong medical needs. Even after receiving a diagnosis, patients can experience social isolation and have trouble knowing where to go and connect with others. Oftentimes with rare disease, populations are small and scattered, so connecting with others who have the diagnosis can be difficult. There are 2 types of registries: contact and patient registries. Contact registries mainly collect patient information for tracking purposes and follow-up. Patient registries, in particular natural history studies, follow patients over a longitudinal time period. Natural history studies allow us to follow the progression of the disease from the pre-symptomatic phase to diagnosis and to other different clinical stages throughout the patient's lifetime. Natural history studies are important because they inform patient care and best practices, contribute to disease understanding, identify research priorities, and inform drug development. Natural history studies collect information on diagnosis, demographics, genetic information, patient-reported outcomes, comprehensive medical data, and clinical trial matching. So this is a little bit of our history of the IAM Rare Registry program. The IAM Rare platform is a research tool designed to capture the natural history of a disease. It is a patient-driven registry that uses information collected to describe a disease over time. NORD launched the first registry on the platform in 2014. In 2015, NORD was awarded a cooperative agreement from the Food and Drug Administration to implement 16 additional patient registries for rare disease organizations. Over the course of 6 years, our registry program has really grown. And in 2020, we launched the Undiagnosed Registry, which helps collect information for those who do not have a disease diagnosis. Since launching in 2014, we have over 40 rare conditions represented, over 12,000 participants, and over 115,000 survey submissions. So now we'll talk a little bit more about the Global PNH Patient Registry. I'll turn it over to Dr. David Arten and Janice to speak a little bit more about PNH and the need in the project community.
So, at AAMDSIF, we know that patients have a critical role in advancing research to better understand their disease and improve treatments. We understand that PNH patients face many of the same challenges encountered by other patients with rare diseases, such as delayed diagnosis and treatment, limited understanding of disease progression and burden, lack of specialists for treatment and consultation, ongoing medical needs and expenses, and very small total population, which is spread all around the world. The Global PNH Patient Registry is designed to address all of these and other challenges faced by the PNH patients and researchers.
So I have been involved in the care of patients with PNH and in research related to PNH actually since 1995. And what's really struck me is how much better things have gotten since then. And there are a lot of reasons for that. It has to do with better understanding of the disease itself and its relationship to aplastic anemia on the level of cells and molecules. And for that, we have to thank our laboratory research community. And some of these projects have been supported by the AAMDSIF. And then the other thing that that I attribute this to is better understanding of the disease on the part of patients and physicians, and better understanding of what happens to patients who have PNH. And then, quite importantly, also is the availability of now 2 new drugs that have been approved for PNH, and there's probably going to be likely a 3rd one. And also better understanding of how to use the drugs that are approved for other disorders like aplastic anemia and blood clotting disorders. And before going on to the next slide, I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page about what PNH is and what physicians and patients deal with. So PNH, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, is on the first surface, it's actually what the disease, what that name describes, that the patient will wake up in the morning and will see dark urine due to hemolysis. And that was what identified the disease. But we now know that it is also associated with aplastic anemia and bone marrow failure, and also blood clotting. And some of the treatments that are used to treat PNH have a small risk of infection that needs to be tracked. And some patients, very rarely, will go on to develop more serious bone marrow diseases. But that's something that we need to be tracking also as a research community, and physicians caring for patients need to track that so that we can identify the rare patient who has that kind of complication. And we've also seen now some new things that can happen in patients with PNH that we only see in patients who are treated, such as iron levels going up and gallstone disease, things like that. So I think that this registry is going to help us really track those things over a large number of patients and help us better understand how to use the drugs that we have available to us and how to better counsel our patients. So maybe I could see the next slide. So the aim of the Global PNH Patient Registry is to be a data collection study for patients around the world to share information about PNH that will fill current and future gaps in research. So the goals are to empower and unite the PNH community through shared knowledge, collect data on demographics, quality of life, treatment, diagnosis, and PNH symptoms, and to increase PNH knowledge and understanding of the progression of the disease. And one of the things that we're going to emphasize is that this is a database that the patients will enter in their own data. And so the patients themselves actually will play a critical role in the quality of the data that we get. And the better data that we get, the more we can learn about PNH in a real-time way as situations change. So we have a real interest in getting our patients as involved as they can and to get them to understand how to enter in data that's going to be most useful for all of us. So I think now I'm turning it back over to Joanna for the next slide.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ayrton. So the Global PNH Patient Registry launched this year. The registry contains surveys to capture data on demographics, quality of life, PNH symptoms, and treatment. So the surveys are added and updated periodically in the registry. Patients will be invited to come back on a schedule to enter data and share their experience. So a few of you may be familiar with the PNH registry that is sponsored by Alexion. Dr. David Arten can speak a little bit more about that registry, but the main difference is that the Global PNH Patient Registry will be patient-reported. Participants will be able to input their own data and answer surveys. It is a longitudinal study, so every 6 months or so, participants will be prompted to update their surveys. The PNH registry, sponsored by Alexion, has data entered by physicians or healthcare providers only. I do want to point out that both registries are observational, collect data every 6 months, and do have a purpose to gain a better understanding of PNH and improve treatment. Dr. Ayrton, if you want to say a few words on the Alexion PNH registry.
Yes. So I see these two registries as being complementary. They will give us different information, and together will be very powerful. The PNH registry that's sponsored by Alexion that you're showing us on the right-hand side of the slide, that one really asks specific questions like yes, no, multiple choice, check off, enter in numbers. And there'll be some of that in this registry also, but this one had the Global PNH Patient Registry on the left-hand side of the slide. This one has the opportunity for patients to enter in their own narratives. So it's a little bit like the difference between a multiple choice test and an essay question on a test. And this will actually be able to be queried, and we can pull out data that patients enter on things that the other one can't capture. For example, the other one does not have any questions about COVID infection, whereas this one, you can type in anything you like. So we'll be able to see how many of our patients are telling us about their COVID vaccines or their COVID infection and what their experiences are. And that's something that the PNH registry, it could, on the right-hand side of the screen, it could do if it were updated to include that. But the the Global PNH Patient Registry will be able to do it in real time, provided that patients enter in data telling us about what's happening with them.
Thank you, Dr. Ayrton. So now some important insights about the Global PNH Patient Registry. This is an IRB-approved patient registry. An IRB is a board, committee, or a group that reviews and approves research involving human subjects. So this means every individual providing data to the registry will have to sign an informed consent form to allow de-identified data to be utilized for future research. And just a reminder that participation in this registry is voluntary, and participants can withdraw at any time if they choose to change their mind. So the data from the registry can be used to produce peer-reviewed publications that will help disseminate important insights from the registry to the medical community. The data is representative of the patient voice because it is patient-reported. De-identified data from the registry can also be shared with other organizations and researchers to help support collaborative projects. The data from the registry can be used to produce peer-reviewed publications that will help disseminate the data collected through the patient registries on the IMRare platform has been presented through many venues and formats, including patient and medical conferences, webinars, publications, posters, and community reports. So NORD, in collaboration with Trio Health, developed the Power of Patients book that highlights the experience of individuals and families living with rare diseases and demonstrates the importance of patient registries and natural history data to shape the rare disease landscape. You can request a copy of the Power of Patients book by emailing research@raredisease.org. So now we'll talk a little bit more of the data that we expect to get from the Global PNH Patient Registry. So we hope that the data from the Global PNH Patient Registry will inform patient care and best practices, assess patient and caregiver experiences, contribute to disease understanding, identify research priorities, estimate the number of affected patients and those available to participate in research, evaluate the individual and global economic burden of death, inform drug development, and provide an avenue for biospecimen collection. So the Global PNH Patient Registry will inform patient organizations, industry, clinicians, but most importantly, patients, families, and their caregivers. Participants in this registry will have access to their data, other aggregated de-identified data, have insights to patient outcomes, and have a resource for conversations with clinicians and educators. So again, the Global PNH Patient Registry will also inform researchers and regulatory agencies. Researchers will be able to compare and validate findings with patient-reported outcomes, use trends from preliminary data to explore new areas, inform product development, validate measures, and establish new research protocols. Regulatory agencies can use the data to accelerate and improve research, evaluate outcomes from clinical trials, and contextualize clinical trial data and inform new models of engagement. So now we'll talk more about getting involved with the Global PNH Patient Registry. You can visit the Global PNH Patient Registry at pnh.imrare.org. This is a screenshot of the landing page where you'll be able to register and join the registry on the bottom right-hand corner. We also have PNH resources available, such as a registry overview brief, a registration overview, and a frequently asked questions document. You can also learn more about AAMDSIF by visiting their website at aamdsif.org. So now we will open it up for questions. If you do have more questions specific to the Global PNH Patient Registry, please email us at nordregistry@rarediseases.org. For more information about PNH specifically and AMDSIF, please email pnhregistry@amds.org. And for more information about NORD, please email orphan@rarediseases.org. We have some questions that we received during registration that we will take some time to address. You can also type your question in the chat window. If we do not get to your question, our team will follow up with you on a later date. Okay, so one of the questions we've received is, how is the data collected and stored? So our data is stored on a secure web-based platform developed by NORD. Study participants respond to questions grouped with a series of surveys developed per study standards and in collaboration with disease-specific experts. The data is stored on NORD's registry platform system, which adheres to industry standards regarding security protection. Another question we received is, how long does it take to complete the surveys? So depending on the survey, each survey takes an approximate 10 to 15 minutes to complete. There is built-in branching logic that will hide questions that are not applicable to the participant, and that will help reduce the number of questions the participant answers. You can also choose to skip any question that is not required in each of the surveys. Is there a cost to participate in the registry? So there is no cost for patients to join the study. AMDSIF absorbs the cost of the registry for its community. So another question we received is the data safe? Yes, the data is safe, so the registry follows strict government guidelines to assure patient information is protected. The platform is served over HTTPS, which provides traffic encryptions to prevent eavesdropping and any cyber attacks. Communications between the registry platform, application server, and database are also encrypted. Okay. So another question that we received is, can the data be collected worldwide? The patient registry uses an online platform which allows participants to contribute data from anywhere in the world. So individuals from other countries can enter data into the registry, but they should be aware of the data and privacy laws may be different in the United States from other countries. This is a US-based registry that will protect data and privacy according to US requirements. Okay, so one of the other questions we received is, what is an informed consent? So the informed consent process involves 3 key features: disclosing to potential research subjects information needed to make an informed decision, facilitate the understanding of what has been disclosed, and promote the voluntariness of the decision about whether or not to participate in the research. Another question we received is, can you complete the surveys from an iPhone or mobile device? And the answer is yes. These surveys are mobile friendly, and you'll be able to create an account on your phone and answer the surveys on your phone as well. Once again, I want to thank everyone for joining today. We appreciate your time. We are very excited to launch this registry, so we hope to have a lot of your support in the PNH community. Thank you.
We'll now answer additional questions about the Global PNH Patient Registry. Today's panelists are PNH expert Dr. David Ariton from NYU Langone Health, Janice Fry-Angel, the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of AAMDSIF, and Janet Morrow and Stephanie Christopher from the National Organization for Rare Diseases. Our first question, this comes from someone who is viewing this afternoon. When I was diagnosed with aplastic anemia and treated with ATG in October 2015, my PNH clone was something like 0.007%, When I was symptomatic enough to start infusion therapy treatment in June 2019, my PNH clone was around 50%. For the purposes of both this new registry and the existing Alexion registry, when was I actually diagnosed with PNH? My understanding is that many folks have a tiny PNH clone and never even know it, and I know that many people with PNH are unsure about how to answer the question, when were you first diagnosed with PNH? Is it helpful to somehow differentiate between noticing a PNH clone and being diagnosed with PNH that needs to be treated? How might this best be done so that everyone is speaking the same language for the purpose of useful future data collection? That's certainly a question for Dr. Ayrton. And
Wow.
I'm happy to repeat parts of that. I know it was a lengthy question, so I can repeat any of it.
That is one of the best questions I've ever gotten from anybody when I've served on a panel. So, but remind me, what was the percent PNH clone when it was first diagnosed, when it was first found? I know it's 50% now.
It was in October 2015, it was something like 0.007%. And then 4 years later,
right,
it was 50%.
Right. Okay. So, right. So it's about, so it was really like almost, it's a little less than 1 in 10,000 when it was first identified. And then now it's like 50-50, right? 1 in 1. So this gets into the definition of PNH. And we know that there's a spectrum between PNH and aplastic anemia, and that we do not know really where someone crosses the line. It's a little bit like sugars in someone with diabetes, right? Somebody could have sugars that are not normal, but they haven't quite crossed the line. And the question is, where do you cross the line? To talk about pre-diabetes versus glucose intolerance and diabetes. So it's an arbitrary line. For purposes of treatment, we generally treat PNH clones in people who have aplastic anemia when they are more than 50% of the white cells or 20% of the red cells. And when we say treatment, we mean adopt some strategy for the prevention of blood clots. Below that number, we generally are less concerned about blood clots. Now, because we're talking about the registry, the Alexion-sponsored registry initially allowed people onto it who had very small clones that are identified, the way yours probably was, with a very sensitive test. Most flow cytometry tests would not report that as being an abnormal result. But as you point out, normal people do have tiny PNH clones. It's more like 1 in 100,000 rather than 1 in 10,000, which is what this one was like. And at some point along the line, the Alexion registry moved the goalposts a little bit, and I believe the cutoff became 1%. Don't quote me on that. It was either 0.1 or 1%. So, and for the purposes of this registry, I actually honestly do not know what we're calling a cutoff. But one of the advantages of this is that patients can upload their data and enter in data like this, and we'll be able to decide after the fact who we want to define as PNH and who we don't, and maybe even use this registry to help really define what the cutoff would be.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad we received that question and you were able to clarify that.
Yeah, but actually, Alice, does anyone on your end know what our cutoff is for joining this registry? Do you have to have a minimal PNH clone size to be considered PNH for this registry?
I don't know that offhand myself. I don't know if that's
Alice or Janice. I can at least tell you what's in the protocol. This is Stephanie from NORD. our protocol states that individuals of any age with a confirmed diagnosis of PNH or a diagnosis consistent with PNH are eligible for inclusion. So we are not asking for it sounds like we are not asking at this point for a specific gene. And then we define in here that PNH is defined as a genetic mutation in the PIGA gene.
Right.
Janice or Alice, I don't know if you want to weigh in any more on that, but that's just what we have written on the protocol.
I think if you identify yourself as a PNH patient, you should participate in the registry, and we welcome you.
And I might add that, you know, the whole idea of this registry is to collect natural history data, and one of the things about natural history data is to help us understand the journey of diagnosis and how your disease progresses over time. So we'll ask you to come back and update your information later on. So even if you are early on in your diagnosis or consider yourself to be a PNH patient, the information that you can provide to us would be very valuable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And maybe a way to be as inclusive as possible is to say that anybody who has a laboratory report that's indicating an abnormal PNH cell population would be encouraged to enroll. So in your case, they picked up 0.007%, and that lab, very sensitive lab, they reported as abnormal. So you would have been eligible to enroll in the registry at that point, if this is what we wind up adopting.
Thank you, everyone. We have another question. Will patient members of the new registry will be able to search both specific and anecdotal information in the new global database? As new complement inhibitor treatments are becoming available, would this search function include access to all specific and anecdotal information regarding experiences with these different treatments?
Alice, I don't know who you would like to have take that first.
Well, Dr. Ayrton, what do you think about that first? And then we can talk about ongoing surveys that will be added to the registry, and I'll turn that over to Stephanie and Janet.
So this is a very good question, and I'm glad it's coming up now. One of the advantages of this type of registry is that physicians will be able to search for free text that patients enter in, exactly what you're talking about. What I don't know is if patients themselves would want this to be available to everybody, and that I don't know. And I think that if patients are entering data thinking only physicians are going to look at it, then we have to keep it that way. However, we might be able to build in something where patients can say, click on it to say, anyone can search this narrative versus only physicians and researchers are searching this narrative. But I don't know, has this been addressed before with this registry?
Dr. Ayrton, if I could weigh in on this right now, at least how it's set up right now. I mean, and to a point that was raised in the recording as well, is that this is a research study and it has been reviewed and is under the oversight of an institutional review board or an IRB. So right now, the only folks that can see the data in aggregate or in any form are researchers who have either researchers that are a part of the AAMDSIF team or researchers that AAMDSIF seeks to work with. Now, to Dr. Ayrton's point, we do have great potential to be able to look at free text and to look at data in aggregate and potentially identify trends. But right now, as the registry is set up, patients who are in the registry will not be able to access or see anyone else's data other than their own.
And I think that's reasonable because patients can always post whatever they want to post on Facebook pages and online. If they want to make something open, they can take all the data they put up and they can post it online on their Facebook page and let other people see it. So you actually don't need this registry to, to publicize your own story if that's what you want to do.
Thank you.
But patients can see it in aggregate, right? They can see the data of other patients, but in aggregate. So
Yes,
and
that's what I was about to say.
And see,
They will
compare
be-
themselves to others, but it's not anything that you can identify.
They'll be able to
Correct.
see graphs that show trends. If it were a medication page and you had it specific, you know, how many patients are taking A, B, or C, they will be able to see a broad unidentified graph. But that's the only way right now that we can protect patient privacy.
I apologize. I probably was a little too quick to say patients can't see anything. Patients actually, Janet is correct. Patients can see a kind of a de-identified high level view of the data, which is actually really interesting to take a look at. I think it's a somewhat limited view until we have a certain number of patients, and because of the need to protect patient privacy, because if we only had 3 patients in the registry, then we don't want to share aggregate data yet, because it's still, you could narrow down who was who, but once we have a certain amut of data, we
There's
do make
enough
those
now,
graphs
so
available.
there are already graphs and stuff.
Cool.
So it's, you know, there's enough. So we're encouraging everyone to participate so they can see it, because that's the only way you can see it.
Yeah, and Janet and I always love the chance to hear from patient groups that have had chance to take a look at that aggregate data. That's really exciting for us.
And Janice, since you brought that up, can you reiterate why it is so important for PNH patients and caregivers, if necessary, on their behalf to participate in the registry?
If you participate, that's the only way that you can actually see the data and get a sense of where you fit in the whole big picture. And because it is a registry for you, you know, for patients and by patients, that's the only people that we're letting at this point see anything. You know, AMDSAF owns the registry, so we can, you know, decide who's going to see it. At this point, it's really only for patients. You know, eventually it will be obviously for researchers, but right now it is patient-run, patient, you know, focused, and it's for patients to see the results.
Thank you. Another question we've received, can patients who have had a transplant for PNH join the registry?
Janice or
Yes.
Dr. Aritan, I'd let you all weigh in on that first.
Yeah, so I would say, I do not know the answer to that question, but I think that the answer should be yes. For a lot of survival studies and outcome studies, we actually do what we call censor patients after a transplant, because at that point they are presumably cured of their PNH. But it's often helpful to look at data that's not censored for the time of transplant, and that's the only way we'll be able to capture that. So the answer, I think, should be yes.
Another question we've received is, how often do people have both aplastic anemia and PNH?
Well, one way of answering that is to say that about 40% of patients with aplastic anemia will have a PNH clone at some point. And another way of saying that is 100% of PNH patients will have decreased stem cell function, even if they have normal platelet count and white count. So the answer is there's a big amount of overlap.
And Dr. Aritan, can you discuss additionally, beyond what you said in the recorded program earlier, how will research priorities be set based on the registry data as it begins to accumulate, and you and the others on the medical advisory committee will determine future survey content and other information you'd like to see?
Yeah.
How will that priority be made?
It's a good question. You know, the limiting factor is not the computer or the computer power or the amount of electricity this server is drawing. The limiting factor is the time of the researchers who are going to be involved in the registry. And so if I had to say, I think that the priority would be to use the registry to address issues of patient outcome and safety. So if there's a way of looking into the registry to see whether patients who get COVID who have PNH are at greater or less risk of doing poorly, that's something that we're going to need to know. Same thing with comparing the outcomes of the different treatments that patients choose. If one new treatment is much better or much worse than some of the others, then that's something that we may be able to see in the registry. So those are questions that immediately impact patient outcome. Well, how physicians take care of patients. So that would be my priority. I would like it if we all had time to ask many questions of the registry, but that's how I would prioritize.
Thank you. And also, if someone has a family member who may be reluctant to join the registry, can a family member join for them or on their behalf? How would that work? And that might be a question first for Nord to answer what the process is for someone filling in the registry questions and surveys on behalf of a PNH patient.
Sure. Thank you for that. So if for a family member to answer on behalf of another family member, that can only happen if you're an individual who is authorized under applicable law to consent on behalf of that prospective subject. So if you're a caregiver and you have, if you're what they refer to in the IRB as the legally authorized representative, you might be able to register on behalf of the patient. But if the patient is still able to, if the person with PNH is able to consent, then they need to be the one that consents and participates in the survey. So, go ahead.
There's a second question though of whether somebody who consents can have somebody help them enter the data. So.
Oh, that, Janet, I don't know if you might want to weigh in on that. So you're talking about if someone consents and then has someone else help provide assistance on inputting data into the registry?
I had a feeling that was what the question was getting at.
That I maybe misunderstood the question then.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's both actually.
Okay.
Someone could enter on their behalf, but also if someone needs assistance,
legally, if a person is able to make the decision to participate in the study, they have to sign the consent themselves. If they have the capacity to understand the consent and they choose not to sign it, a legally authorized representative cannot sign on their behalf. So that's for a person that has capacity to understand the consent. If there's someone who doesn't have the capacity, then the legally authorized representative can make the choice to sign the consent and participate in the study with the understanding that they'll explain the study to the best of the participants' ability to understand and have, in effect, an assent by that patient. Now, let's say I have signed the consent for myself, but I have a visual issue and I can't read the screen. I can have somebody read it for me because they're sitting next to me. I mean, because we can't see this happening, that's got to be also an honor system. We have to, but legally, someone cannot sign consent for somebody that has the capacity to understand and agree for themselves.
Yeah, and then just to reflect on that or to reinforce that, if it is someone that's simply providing assistance, typing in answers, that is okay as long as the participant has actually given consent themselves to participate and to have that person assist with the typing. Did we have any additional questions?
Yes, yes, we do. There's another one here also related to the data entry, and being part of the registry. If I join and change my mind about being part of the registry, how do I discontinue participation? What happens to my information?
Sure. No, that's a great question. And as we said in the video, and as we've said when we talk about this registry and any of the registries that NORD supports, is that your participation is completely voluntary. And if you choose to withdraw consent, you can notify within the registry platform itself, or you can notify one of the either the PNH or the NORD staff that you'd like to withdraw from the study. What happens at that point is that your data entry in our system is flagged and kind of isolated, so that we know that in any sort of future data extracts that your data will not be included. Now, if there's already been a data report already pulled, we obviously can't take your data away if it's already been pulled, but in any future access to the data, we will make sure that your data is isolated and not included if you do not wish to continue in the registry.
Another nice feature of this registry is that if somebody has chosen to withdraw consent, but they later change their mind, they can do the reconsent and they will continue with the same patient number. So all their information is not wiped and they can continue to participate.
Thank you. And this is a question for Dr. Arreton, I believe, but our NORD representatives may want to weigh in on this as well. If my diagnosis changes and I develop an overlapping disease such as MDS, do I still qualify for the registry? How would I report this new diagnosis?
So the answer is yes, absolutely. That's what we want to know. And we want you to stay on the registry so that we can follow over time what happens to such patients. And this would be the type of information that the patient would be providing. I don't recall if the registry specifically asked that question, but if I know that the Alexion registry does, but even if it doesn't, it's the type of thing that can and should be put into a narrative.
Thank you. And we're just about at the end of our time here. Janice will just ask you with one final question, how patients can, if they have additional questions after if they were watching this on demand afterwards or at any time, who can they contact and ask for more information about the registry, and how can we provide that information?
I mean, they can contact the AMDSAF. The actual email is, I'm not sure, I think it's info. Is it info at AMDS?
Yes, that's one of the options. And our website, of course. I believe there's a designated page for the PNH registry.
Yes. So go to our website and just put PNH in and you'll find us.
Or info@aamds.org or help@aamds.org would connect you directly to someone who can answer promptly. And Dr. Arreton, one final question for you to kind of sum up the registry, and now that it's initiated and people are enrolling, why is this so important for you as a researcher that it is indeed a global PNH patient registry? It is not US only. And of course, your colleagues on the Medical Advisory Committee are from several other countries as well. Why is this so important for you as both a clinician and a researcher?
Well, this is important because the behavior of PNH may be different in different countries. For example, there's a much higher risk of blood clotting in the United States and Europe than there is in Asian countries. And also, there may be different influences of diet, for example, or different exposure to pathogens in different countries that might be important in people who are on immunosuppressing drugs for aplastic anemia or PNH. So yes, we want to capture as much information as we can from all over the world.
Thank you, Dr. Ayrton, and thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your time and expertise with us today. If you would like to watch this webinar again at a later time, it will be available on our website within 2 to 3 business days. If you were not able to answer your question today, please send an email to nordregistry@rarediseases.org or to help@aamds.org. On behalf of the Aplastic Anemia and MDS International Foundation, thank you for joining us today and for making us your resource of choice for information on bone marrow failure diseases. The AAMDSIF Medical Advisory Board and team are here to help you and your family as we have for the past 37 years. This concludes today's program.